Hey guys, welcome back in here to Legacy. So today we're going to go ahead and we're going to finish up the biggest or the second last video on mechanics. And then I'm going to do a video on the Land of Legend. And guys, this will be done. There are only about 3 more videos in this series. So yay, we're almost done doing Dragon Warriors for us. It's been a long video series, but it's been a lot of fun. I really hope you guys have watched this and better understand Dragon Warriors as a game. That being said, let's jump into this. We're going to talk about the rules that are not combat, not magic, since those have their own videos. And this is going to cover both player and GM facing rules. So the rule section here, I'm going to go through the rule section. It's going to be very technical, very mechanical, but don't let that scare you off of the video. Okay, so the first section in here is all about the adventuring strategy, guys. Basically, it's going to outline using foot traffic, doing the legwork, knowing how to fight, knowing what you need to kill the opponents, equipping yourself appropriately, hiring hirelings, hiring NPCs, things like that. Mechanically, it's pretty simple. It gets more in depth in that in the GM section. I'll get into that when I get into hirelings in the NPC section, but it does talk a lot about that. And then it gets into the actual rules, so let's dive into its actual rules. Illumination is where it's going to start because the majority of Dragon Warriors adventures take place in underground caverns, the bottoms of temples, things like that. They're underground, in the dark. So you need illumination. There is a reason every class in the game starts with a hand lantern. So a hooded hand lantern. Because you're going to be in the dark a lot. A lantern can illuminate up to 15 meters away from you. If 2 of them are used, you can see up to, I believe it is, I'm sorry, not 2. It's only 15 meters for a lantern period. And the oil in it will burn for 2 hours, up to 2 hours per use of oil. So you're going to need more oil as well. It's pretty simple to understand that illumination rule. Torches are 10 meters. If 2 of them are used together, you will get 15 meters of light. And that's the most you can see. Otherwise, you take the penalties for fighting in darkness, which I'll get to here in a second. If you drop or the torch is knocked out of your hand, there is a chance it will go out. It is a 20% chance anytime the torch hits the ground forcefully. So if it's knocked out of your hand, you drop it, surprise, anything like that, there's a straight 20% chance. You can roll a percentile die. If you roll greater than 20, you're done. The torch is going to go out. Or I'm sorry, greater than 80, the torch is going to go out. So that's just how torches work. If you have a torch, it burns for 1 hour. There are also spells that create illumination, which will be covered in the Book of Magic. I'm not going to get into each individual spell, but there are light spell equivalents in this game. So you can use those as well. And they have their own spell expiries and stuff like that. So, surprise. Surprise happens anytime you run into a group of monsters, unless for some reason you guys are charging each other across the battlefield. There is a 1 in 6 on a d6 chance that the monsters will surprise the player characters. Because typically you're wandering underground, suddenly you expose the monster. They may come out of from behind a pillar, they may come out of a hole in the wall, whatever. You're not there, you can't see them until you're right on top of them. There is a 1 in 6 chance that they can surprise you. That being said, it is actually exceedingly difficult for players to surprise monsters because of the light in underground environments. Monsters will see your light before you will see them, generally speaking. However, you can set up traps and ambushes as player characters. Purposely draw the monster into an ambush, which would give you a 1 in 6 chance as well to surprise the monster. So surprise is always a 1 in 6. So you basically have a 17% chance to surprise the monsters. There you go. Pretty simple mechanic. Fighting in the dark, unless you're in the light of torch, hooded lantern, or spell, you're going to take a -4 to your attack and -8 to your defense at all times fighting in the dark. I'm sorry about that. Most monsters can see in the dark. Undead in particular see perfectly in the dark, but the side effect of that, and we'll get into it when we get into penalties to stealth and perceptions, is that if they're caught in a bright light, they take severe penalties because of the way dark vision works and undead vision works. So know that. So like if you're fighting a zombie and it's just eating you alive, you can do something like throw a blight spell in its eyes to blind it. Very possible. So battle order is the next thing they're going to talk about. Guys, battle order is important in this game because of the way that measurement works. So a character with a sword, mace, or other common melee weapon requires about 1.5 meters of space to fight efficiently, which means that in a 3-meter hallway, you can only stand 2 people to a 3-meter hallway and fight efficiently, period. With a halberd or polearm, 2-handed swords, battle axe, it's going to require 2 meters of space to fight efficiently. So it's going to be 1 in a 3-meter hallway, which would be about the average size of a hallway, would be about 2 to 3 meters. So, and then with short swords and spears, do not need as much room because they're piercing weapons, not slashing weapons. So they can fight up to 3 abreast in a 3-meter hallway because they don't require any space. They require about 1 meter of space to operate. And archers, crossbowmen, and spellcasters can also fight 3 abreast in a 3-meter hallway. Basically, determine how big the hallway is and then divide it by those numbers. 1.5 for most slashing or bludgeoning weapons. Large weapons are going to be 2 meters. Slashing weapons and spellcasters and such are going to require 1 meter of space to fight efficiently. And then it does give great advice here on setting your battle order, guys. Setting your battle order is important, and it does say try to vary it. Something I will say for this game, try to keep your casters away from extreme ends of the party. Do not put your caster at the end of a line or at the front of a line. That is a good way to get them killed. Generally, spellcasters kind of want to be in the middle of the group, because that way, if something jumps you from behind, you have somebody in between them. Something jumps you from the front, you have somebody in between them. Can't do anything. They jump you from the side, of course. But, learning to fight against walls, for example, don't let yourself get surrounded. Getting surrounded is dangerous because if something's behind you, your defense is treated as 0. So you get no defense from back attacks. So don't let yourself get surrounded. Back up against walls. Funnel enemies. Stand 2 people with long swords in a 3-meter hallway and make the monsters come to you. Don't go to them. Again, rushing into combat in this game is a very good way to kill yourself. You will not survive because what will happen is in the GM section, it gets into this. Monsters should be used intelligently. That means if you're fighting a bunch of orcs are not stupid monsters. They are combat monsters. They know what they're doing. They're going to surround somebody who's in the wide open. So use the terrain to your advantage. Put your back against a wall so you're only fighting 2 of them at a time. Put yourself in a doorway, whatever. And make sure that everyone in the group understands the battle order, because that is going to be important to how combat plays out in this game. And it's a very unique way to think of it. And it's actually one of the few games that actually kind of has mechanical effects for battle order. Because of the rules, if you go listen to my combat chapter review, being surrounded, you have to split your defense anyways. And like I said, if they're behind you, you can't defend against them at all. So you do not want people behind you, and you do not want to be fighting, 4 or 5 monsters at a time. You want to be fighting 1 to 2 monsters at a time with good defense around you. So next step here, locked doors. How do you get past locked doors in the Dragon Warriors? You can pick the lock. That is a possibility if you have a lock picking kit. However, it can be forced open. Doors generally have what's called a strength of 16. Challenges in this game are rated on a 1 to 20 scale. And if you have that score, you can just simply force the item or force whatever you're trying to do. So in this case, you're trying to force a door. If you have a 16 or greater strength, you can just barge through the door. Otherwise, you have to roll under your strength on a D20. No matter what happens, if you have less than 16 strength, every attempt you make, successful or not, does 1 hit point of damage to you to represent the damage and the strain of trying to push through the door. And you can vary the strength of doors. So not every door is a wretched wooden door, and not every door is a stone pillar door that's going to be impossible to force. So you can give a door a strength of 9 to represent that it's basically dilapidated and gone, or you can give it a strength of 20 to represent that it's like a steel door. That is a total possibility. You also can use axes to hack through wooden doors. There is no roll necessary to do this, just time consumption. Depending on the door, the GM's going to kind of roll how long that's going to take, but should take several minutes to get through the door all the way. Pretty simplistic, not complicated at all. Concept. Okay. Next step here, next thing to talk about here, and it's about, this is going to be something that's kind of very useful because this is something that's going to come up a lot more. Stealth and perceptions. Okay, so when you're stealthing in this game, you have a stealth score with every character. I talked about it in the video about assassins. They get way higher stealth than everybody else. Stealth is generally done with stealth minus the perception of the perceiving character, rolled under on a 2d10 roll. However, that being said, stealth is never that simple. So stealth actually gets a laundry list of modifiers. These are some of the modifiers you can apply when somebody is stealthing. You total all the modifiers before you make your roll. So you can kind of see there, wearing plate armor is going to make you super unstealthy. Moving too quickly is going to affect your stealth. If you don't have cover, and cover can be anything from stalactites to columns to boxes, whatever. The GM gets final arbitration on whether or not something is considered cover for the purposes of stealth. Perception suffers the same effects. If you're trying to sneak somebody in pitch black, you can see their perception is way low. If they're asleep, their perception is even worse. Listening intently, not many people are going to do that, but if somebody, like I say, you come up on a ranger type character who's trained to perceive things wrong in their environment, listening intently, they may be listening intently. If you're in a loud castle environment, where there's a lot of, say they're constructing on the castle, you're going to get a perception penalty for your perceptions or the enemy's perceptions. So it is absolutely vital. Another thing that I'll get into a little more when we get into the GMing section is sight does affect perception, for the record. So, and stuff like broad daylight, for example, at +5 for something that has dark vision, for example, that would not be a +5. That would be a -5 because dark vision is normally blinded by bright light. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you get invisibility cast on you for any reason, you gain +7 to your stealth, flat +7, and no other factors will matter. Period. And then there's also a spell called Pass Unseen. Anything under 4th rank just cannot perceive you. It literally like clouds you out of their mind. So Pass Unseen is a pretty useful spell if you can take it. And guys, I'm not going to get into the section about when the stealth roll is made. I think you guys can make common sense of it. Generally speaking, if you're trying to hide from an enemy, you're trying to sneak in somewhere, anything like that, that's when stealth is going to be made. Pretty simplistic, not a hard concept at all to really follow. Tracking skill. This is another skill that's going to come up pretty often because knights, barbarians, and assassins can all track. It allows you to track doing this. So nobody else can do this, but people have the tracking skill. You can track any trail of up to 3 days old by rolling 1d20. If you roll less than your perception, you track the quarry for 1 day before making another roll. If you cross rivers, into different terrains, say from hills to mountains. If there's a snowstorm or a rainstorm that comes up during play, you'll make another tracking roll at that point as well, because the trail will have gotten muddy and yada, yada, yada. For every day beyond the third, you will add 1d4 to that 1d20 roll to try to beat your perception. So if you're trying to track a 5-day-old trail, it's going to be 1d20 plus 2d4 versus your perception. None of these rolls are super difficult at all. They're pretty simplistic rolls. Climbing. Climbing is handled a lot like breaking down doors. You're going to assign difficulties to it. Let me see if I can bring up the climbing difficulties. Here's the climbing difficulties. Yeah, okay. You're going to assign difficulty factors to it based on what they're climbing. So climbing a ladder, you guys can see, is a 3. Smooth stone wall is an 18. If you have a reflex equal to that, you can climb it without any trouble. If you do not have a reflex score equal to the difficulty factor, you must roll under your reflex on a d20. If you fail, you will fall at a random point in the climb. If you survive that fall, you can try again. Which gets into the next step, which is falling damage. This game, of course, being British, uses meters, so keep that in mind. You can generally fall 1 to 2 meters without much damage. Anything over 2 meters, you're going to start taking serious damage from. This is where the Assassin's free fall or break fall ability can be really useful because they climb a lot. So the higher you climb, the worse you're going to take damage. You can see on the table, falling from 6 meters is going to do significant damage, which is about 18 feet. So, 1d4, keep in mind, guys, 1d4 damage in this game is nothing to sneeze at. 4 damage is actually a pretty healthy amount of damage in this game. If you're wearing armor of any kind, you take less damage from a fall. You take 2 hit points less damage from a fall anytime you fall. So basically, if you fall from 2 meters or less, you will take no damage. But everything else will maintain and stay the same. So again, climbing is simple. You find the difficulty of the climb. If you have that reflex, you make the climb no trouble. Otherwise, you're going to roll. If you fail, you fall and then take falling damage as appropriate. The next part of this, the player-facing thing you need to know is if there's not a roll to cover it, basically you're either going to find a statistic that can emulate it, like pickpocketing would be a reflex skill. You would roll your reflexes under a d20 on, or under your reflexes on d20 to pickpocket. If it would require multiple, or could fall under multiple attributes, 2 attributes, you would combine them and average them. So the example that they give in here would be cheating in a game of chance, would be reflexes and intelligence. So you would take your reflexes, your intelligence, average them, and then attempt to roll under that on a d20. Pretty simple right there. Basically, the game just... It's a lot like old school BX, D&D, and first edition, which didn't have skills, which is skills were just treated as attribute tests. In extra special cases that say an attribute doesn't apply for some reason or whatever, just turn it into a percentile chance. That's all you do. So if you're trying to bluff a guard, because there's not a charisma skill in this game, if you're trying to bluff a guard, you can give him a percentage chance that he'll buy your story based on how you describe what you're doing and everything else. In the circumstances, maybe the guard's drunk, whatever, or he's lazy, yada, yada, yada. You provide a percentage chance. The player rolls percentile. If he beats the percentile, the guard believes him and he's able to bluff his way past. So the game is very much, from a player facing, does tend to be very much rolling over rules. There are hard rules for very specific circumstances, but there is a lot of space in this game for getting to not having a roll and being like, oh crap, I need something to resolve this. You can do it very easily, either use percentage or use attributes. Getting to the GM facing rules, game time. Guys, if you don't know the difference between game time and real time, I don't know what to tell you. It does encourage the use of calendars in this game because you can start an adventure in the fall and end in the winter, depending on how long the adventure is, or the campaign is. So keep track of time, game time. Also, because in game time, certain things take a day at a time to complete, or 2 days at a time to complete. So, and when it comes to crafting, it can take a full year to complete. So, keep that in mind. Game time is important in this game because there's so much that is tracked in game time. That's the big stick with game time in Dragon Warriors is there's a lot you have to keep track of. So really, I would encourage you to keep a calendar of some kind, even if it's just how many days have passed. Kind of game time calendar. Keep a game time calendar. Now we're going to get into NPC characters. NPC characters, they come, they go. They can be hired out on the basis of need, and it's going to depend on where you're at to depend on how many people you can hire and what they can be hired as. So, some are adventurers, some of them are just quite simply hothead guys that want to get in a fight. Hotheads are treated as 0 rank characters. They have a set of statting of abilities. They have attack 11, defense 5, 1d6 plus 3 health points. You will need to roll their reflexes for the purposes of putting them in combat. And generally speaking, a full adventurer will be 10 florins a day, whereas a hothead would be 2 to 8. So roll 2d4 florins per day to hire. Any NPC adventurers, which are going to be your knights and barbarians, sorcerers, all that kind of stuff, they do gain experience just like the player characters, which is awesome. I actually really like that. It's possible for them to gain levels and ranks as you adventure with them. If a hothead continues to adventure with your group, if they survive 6 underworld expeditions, they do become knights of the first rank and therefore are eligible to gain experience. Again, I didn't copy this table, but there's a table in here. It tells you how many of each type of person is readily available in most places. So, for example, a village will have about 30% chance of having 1 to 4 hotheads and a 10% chance of 1 to 2 first-rank knight or barbarian. So, villages are a little less, whereas a castle has a slightly better chance of having knights in tow that will go on adventures with you. You can also get what are called bearers. They do not fight. They do not have stats. They are killable. Basically, the way I would treat bearers is if they ever got hit, 1 hit point will kill these guys. They're people that are too infirm or lazy to work in the field and will agree to accompany you. Typically, there's 2 to 3 of these guys around any village. And they will work for 15 copper pennies per day, which is about 1.5 florins. And generally, you'll leave 20 silver florins with the family as a payment in case they die. They never join in combat. I already said that. If they encounter monsters, they are subject to morale checks. So if you have a bear carrying your lantern, be aware combats are bad for them. They can break and run away, and you will be fighting in the dark. Which I'll get into morale checks here in a second. And the way they make them is a little different. Again, fellow adventurers that join your party are going to join on equal footing. So if you hire a knight, a sorcerer, a barbarian, a mystic, whatever, they're going to want some type of share. This is standard hireling stuff. They're going to want some type of share of the treasure. They're going to want some type of payment for their goods and their services. They have to have a reason to be with you. You're not just going to walk up to a sorcerer and be like, come on, and he's going to come. They need a reason to be there. They need a reason to adventure with you, unlike hirelings. And it gets into how you can do that. There's also a full set of tables in here with the average statistics for a general rank of a character. So if you're a 3rd rank party, you want to hire a 3rd rank sorcerer, which is pretty atypical. Say you don't have a sorcerer in a party, you want a sorcerer. It gives you full stats outside of the reflexes, which you'll need. and stuff. You'll need to roll their attributes, but it gives you the stats you need to run them through combat. Dying in this game is a real thing. Unfortunately, it does cover this. Dying is a real thing. So if you watch the combat video, you die at -3 hit points. At 0, you pass out and begin to die. At -3, you are dead. There is very precious little resurrection magic in Legend. So generally speaking, if a player character dies, a player character is dead. Period. They're gone. Good luck. Create a new character. They give you some good advice in here on trying to introduce new characters. If there's a hireling around or whatever, just hand them the hireling to play for the rest of the session or whatever. So don't be afraid of using death in this game because, like I said earlier, fighting stupid will get you killed. It's not the GM's fault if you don't fight smart at all. We've already talked a little bit about poison in the assassin video. Poisons in this game are save or suck based on the strength of the poison. So the stronger the poison, the more dice you're going to roll under your strength. If you roll under your strength, you just take the hit point damage. If you do not roll under the strength, you just straight out die. That's just how it works. And they do... it'll tell you exactly how many hit points they do and in what round. So a normal poison, for example, if you save versus it, does 1d4 hit points in the first round and 1d3 in the second, and no subsequent damage from there. So again, pretty simple rules for poisons. And it's always done on a certain D6 roll. So a weak poison would be 2d6, a strong poison would be 4d6. So basically you rate the poison weak to strong, weak, normal, or strong, and you go from there. Okay, so morale checks. This is going to be where I was talking about morale checks for bearers. So the way that this happened, you deduct the creature's attack score from the added total of the victim's rank, strength, and intelligence. So the example they give here is a forest harpy with an attack of 9 attacks Balin, a first-rank warrior with strength of 16 and intelligence 10, making a total of 27. This means Balin must roll 18 or less on D20 to avoid the consequences of the morale check. However, bearers do not use all that calculation. They instead go based on how much money you're paying them per day. So if you're paying them 15 coppers per day, it's going to be 15 minus the attack score or under. So bearers can break pretty easily unless you're paying them very handsomely. That's just how that goes. When you fail a morale check, you flee the battlefield for 10 rounds before gaining your courage. Once you fail a morale check against a particular creature, you must automatically make a morale check the next time you meet such a creature, even if the circumstances are friendly. So, and it will have twice this normal attack value the next time you meet it. So that harpy that is a 9, the first time Balin meets it, if he fails that check, the next time he meets one, it will treat the attack value as an 18, not a 9. Again, it's not complicated. It sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. It's a very simple roll. Fright attacks. Ghost, other supernatural creatures can scare you to death. So the way that this is handled, you're going to roll a d12, subtract the victim's rank, and the result is the number the attacking character or creature must roll to or less on the 2d10 attack in order to scare its victim to death. So let's just give an example. You have a second rank knight. Here, you roll a 7. You have a 5. If you can't roll under a 5 on 2d10, you don't scare the knight to death. Again, very simple, very, very uncomplicated mechanics. Seems a little burdensome, not really as burdensome in play. Gaze attacks, you can suffer dire consequences from things like basilisk, hypnotized, all that kind of fun stuff. It's attacked by a magical attack, as indicated in the creature's description. Occasionally, this will be a afraid attack. That's mechanics. Basically, if a creature has a gaze attack, if they surprise you, you have about an 80% chance of meeting their gaze and being subject to the gaze attack. If you're not surprised, it's only 40%. And there's about a 40% chance that you will meet their gaze in combat unless you actively state that you are trying not to look at their face. And what you do is for each 10% chance you want to reduce it by, you take -1 attack and -2 defense to a total of -4 attack, -8 defense because you're not really paying attention. Okay. Again, that one's a little clunky, but not as clunky as it sounds. Pretty simple. Gaze attacks can be very powerful, so be very cautious as a GM in using them because of how the rules are written. Then we get into vision types. Vision types are going to affect your ability to see in certain lights. So you can see on this table, for someone with normal vision, their perception is going to be modified by these numbers. If there's no light, they get -7. If they're in bright light, they get +5. But again, you can see dark sight, for example, is completely opposite because it's designed to only be seen in dark. Elf sight allows you to see better in the dark, but not perfectly. So again, this table will be referenced when somebody's trying to stealth generally, or trying to perceive something in like a dark room, or in the case of something with dark sight, a bright room. Vision types are very important because of that. So keep in mind when you're looking at the monsters you're fighting, make sure you know what type of light source and stuff is available to the group, because that's going to make a world of difference. Okay, so curses are fun. This actually, there's a whole 1D100 table that was a little too hard to, I couldn't graft it into a picture because it covers 2 pages, so it's a little weird. But you're going to roll magical attack versus magical defense. If it succeeds, the character's cursed. Then you're going to roll on the D100 table to determine what the curse is. Some curses are what are called delayed actions. Players are not aware they're necessarily aware they're cursed. If they are aware they're cursed, they may not know what the curse is. So it will make players a little more paranoid. But delayed actions for curses can go anywhere. It's another D100 roll. Can take anything from a week to a year to take effect. So keep that in mind. And curses can do all kinds of funny things to characters. You take 8 points away during training. The building you're in gets burned down. You can shatter your weapons. You get turned into a toad. So all these abilities are very kind of creepy. And like I said, certain ones are considered delayed. Certain ones are not. Just kind of depends on what you roll. You'll see on the table, it does say delayed action next to the curse. So when you look at the Game Master section. Madness. This is going to be the last major section here. I'm not going to get into what all the madnesses do. Just know the madnesses are pretty messed up. They can really jank your character. When some spells, creatures, or frightening aspect, etc., have the power to move a character to insanity, when this happens, the Game Master makes 2 dice rolls. The first establishes the degree of insanity, and the second, the type of madness. So you can be mild, intermittent, or acute, which mild means it basically takes effect once, and then you completely recover. Intermittent, you're going to occasionally you'll roll a d6. On a 6, the insanity shows up. And then acute is it's basically on all the time. There are 10 different madnesses in the book. I would encourage you, if you come up with one that's different, please do. There are multiple personalities: paranoia, hysteria, phobia, amnesia, melancholia, catatonia, megalomania, pathological uncertainty, and obsessive mania. These actually cover about 4 pages in the book, so I'm not going to read what each one does. 3 or 4 pages in the book. Just know that they can be very, very scary and very dangerous. Like pathological uncertainty, for example, you literally become paralyzed with the inability to decide what to do. So it makes great role-playing opportunities. Again, guys, this is a mechanic that I would encourage you to use sparingly, because if you overuse it, you're going to have a bunch of broken characters that are not playable. But if you underuse it completely, you're kind of leaving some role playing opportunities on the table. You can recover from madness by being blessed and by a priest in front of an altar bearing the relic of a saint, or alternatively, the GM can allow you to role play your recovery, even as an acute madness. You can recover. Not impossible to become, sane again. Diseases are pretty simple. So you typically there's about a 5% chance per month of contracting the disease if you're sleeping in like fetid, disgusting conditions. The GM's going to decide what disease it is. But if you're in like really, really bad conditions, it can be even 10 or 15%. So if you contract a disease, it happens. Everything happens in the small hours of the morning. So basically, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Character can save against contracted disease by rolling under his current strength on the D20. If he fails, he must roll again each day until he perishes or is cured. It's successful to assume he's avoided contracting any disease. So basically, you're going to roll a percentile chance that there is a disease able to be caught. And then if a player fails that roll, he also gets to roll his strength to see if he fights off the disease. There are medicines, cultures, things like that can cure diseases. However, the first 5 diseases listed on the table in the book will either require successful roll under the character's strength, outlined, or magic to cure them. All loss of health points and characteristics are considered permanent until you're cured. Once you've been cured of the disease, you'll recover health points at normal healing rates and characteristics, apart from looks, which is permanent, at the rate of 1 point per characteristic per week. So healing from diseases is pretty brutal in this game. And the diseases they have in here are Black Death, leprosy, pox, swamp fever, the ague, the wasting disease, influenza, and common cold. So diseases are pretty nasty. Again, very small chance you're going to get one, but once you get one, it can mess you up pretty bad. This is a good point to point out. Sorcerers in this game, while it's a lot of fun to play a sorcerer that does a lot of like heavy damage and magic missiles and fireballs, do not overlook taking utility spells and healing spells. You will need them at some point. I promise. So final advice they give, I'll just read it off for you guys because it's actually pretty good advice. Continually check the character's battle order. Make sure the battle order is consistent where they are. 8 people can't walk abreast in the corridor. It's only 3 meters. So always make sure you know what order they're in and how they're standing and everything else. Always check for surprise when they encounter monsters. That's a big one. The third one, this is something that the book does not do in the monster section. You need to roll the reflexes for the monsters to know when they act in combat. So every time you have a monster that you pull from the bestiary, it does not come with a stat line. So you need to roll 3d6 for their reflexes to determine their reflexes. If there's a large group of similar NPCs or monsters, say you have 5 orcs, you do not need to roll 5 individual reflexes. Roll 1 reflex. That is the group reflex. All the orcs have that reflex. Because it limits bookkeeping. Again, intelligent monsters should fight intelligently. Things like oozes and undead may fight kind of mindlessly. But if you're fighting a dragon, treat it like a dragon. It's not stupid. Okay? Treat things like what they are. And don't be afraid to use tactics against the players. I don't always agree with this one, but the first part I do. Always be able to see your players' rolls. If at a table. Online is a little different bear altogether, but if you're at a table playing Dragon Warriors, make sure you can see your players' rolls so they're not fudging dice and things like that. And it does say don't let them see your rolls. I think that's true for certain types of rolls because there are certain abilities and stuff that should be hidden. But when practical, hide your rolls. When necessary, hide your rolls. And the last bit of advice they give is don't be afraid to make up the rules if you don't know them or if it doesn't exist. Just make it up on the fly. Don't try to create hard, fast rules constantly. With that being said, I would say consistency, though, on that. So if you say that something requires reflexes once, it can't suddenly require intelligence down the road. It is a reflex roll for everybody. But that guys, that is the entirety of the rules section for Dragon Warriors. That is both GM and player facing rules. Very simple game, very mechanically sound. Does have a little bit of jank to it because it's an older game, but very fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed these videos because, like I said, we're winding down. I've only got about 3 more videos I need to do. I'm not going to do a monster video because you can read the monster section for yourself. They're pretty easy to read. They're very well laid out. But we do need to get into how to do your backgrounds for your character, and then I do want to do the video on Legend itself, talk a little bit about the world. But other than that, guys, these videos have been a lot of fun. I really, like I said, hope you guys get something out of them. The goal of this video is that you can sit down and you can play Dragon Warriors fairly efficiently without a lot of reference to the book just by watching these videos. So I hope I've done that. Either way, guys, always leave thoughts, comments, questions, concerns below. I'm always happy to interact with you guys. You guys should know that by now. As long as you're following the 3 rules. No ad hominems, no picking fights, no leave me college dissertations. Other than that, guys, we do hope you have fun, and we do hope to see you guys around the game table at some point.